So today as you watch this video, in the first row here, what I want you to do is you may either draw the balloons, trying to show the relative size of the 4 balloons, or you may simply write down which one's the smallest, if they're the same size or not, which ones are larger, and so on. Here you could write down some of your observations of what happens as the reaction occurs. And with this row here, we're going to either add some extra sodium bicarbonate at the end, or we're going to add some extra vinegar. You're going to write down what happens if it's bubbles or not with the extra amount. With the other row, you could simply cross the other row out. And then when we figure out which reactant is left over, you can write down if it's sodium bicarbonate or vinegar, which is acetic acid in this row, and the one in excess should be the same as the one that's kind of left over. So that's how you're going to complete this table. So what we have here are we have 4 Erlenmeyer flasks filled with 10, 20, 50, and 100 milliliters of 1 molar acetic acid. This is what's in vinegar. Each of the balloons contains 4 grams of sodium bicarbonate. Okay, so now we're going to add the sodium bicarbonate to the flask so you guys can see what will happen. So here's 4 grams added to 10 milliliters of acetic acid. I'm just making sure the balloon doesn't pop off. Okay, next is 20 milliliters of the 1 molar acetic acid with 4 grams of sodium bicarbonate. Okay, next is the 50 milliliters of acetic acid with the 4 grams of sodium bicarbonate. Okay, and the last is 100 milliliters of acetic acid with 4 grams of sodium bicarbonate. Okay, so what you should notice from this video is that the first balloon is very small, second one is a little bit bigger, and then the last 2 balloons are somewhat similar size. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add a little bit of vinegar, that is the 1 molar acetic acid, to each of the flasks to see what happens. Now, in each of the flasks, you probably have something left over. You have some of your products, and you might have a little bit of acetic acid, or you might have a little bit of sodium bicarbonate. So we're going to add a little bit of acetic acid to each of the Erlenmeyer flasks and see if it reacts or not. If it reacts, that tells us that there must have been a little bit of sodium bicarbonate still left in the Erlenmeyer flask. If nothing happens, that means that we still had a little bit of acetic acid left in the Erlenmeyer flask, and that's why it didn't react. Okay, so let's take off each of these balloons now. Let's see, make sure this is finished reacting. First two are definitely finished reacting. So let's add this. So here's a little bit of vinegar. We're going to add that to our first flask. This has 10 milliliters of acetic acid originally. You could definitely hear some reaction going on. Okay, so what do you think is left over in the flask that the acetic acid reacted with? Let's try the second one. This has 20 milliliters of acetic acid originally. Definitely something's happening. What do you think was left over in the flask that the acetic acid reacted with? Okay, let's add something here. This is the 50 milliliters. Nothing really happens. Let's add some to the 100 milliliters. Again, nothing happens. Okay, so when I added the acetic acid to the first two flasks, we saw some bubbling. It was reacting with something in that flask. What do you think was left over in that flask? With the last two flasks, nothing happened. What do you think was mainly in the flask that was left over from our original reactants? Was it sodium bicarbonate or was it acetic acid in these two flasks? Okay, so before we go, I just want to go over this real quick. So the first reaction that we had was between this baking soda, that's sodium bicarbonate, and vinegar. And vinegar is mostly acetic acid or hydrogen acetate. So the first step of this is going to form something called carbonic acid. That is H2CO3. So that is that forms between this hydrogen and this hydrogen carbonate. The other product will be sodium acetate. And then it says carbonic acid then decomposes. It says it forms water and carbon dioxide. So I want you to write that down also. Make sure these two reactions are balanced. So then you're going to answer these other questions based on what you saw. And then make sure you submit this. So there's just a few other questions after that. Okay, so good luck. If you have any questions about this, make sure you come in for tutorial. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday.